go through the usual, inform everybody. So can I first welcome all members and officers to the meeting of the council today, which due to government advice to practice social distancing, this meeting will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the council's website to be viewed as soon as practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda and will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their camera on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as mayor, and at all other times, you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any member and officers wish to raise a point or question, should use the hand up icon on the screen and will come to you in order to receive requests. Please do not use your microphone to invite you to do so. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. And please also do not use the chat function as on Teams. We cannot clear any text on the meeting recording. In the event that the council requires a vote on any items of business before it at the meeting, the monitoring officer will call out the name of each member present in turn and request them to vote verbally for, against, or abstain. I will then ask the monitoring officer to announce the result of the vote and council's decision on the item. Officers from Democratic Services and ICT will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting and where necessary, will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I now ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when invited to speak during the course of the meeting, and they too should ensure the microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. So please can the Democratic Services Officer now announce to the members in attendance today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Mark Galvin, Senior Democratic Services Officer Committees. Members in attendance today are Councillor Amanda Williams, Councillor Alex Williams, Councillor Aniel Bacella, Councillor Brian Jones, Councillor Bridie Sedgmere, Councillor Caroline Webster, Councillor Charles Smith, Councillor Cheryl Green, Councillor Keith Edwards, Councillor Denisha Patel, Councillor Elaine Venables, Councillor Gareth Howells, Councillor Gary Thomas, Councillor Hugh David, Leader, Councillor Howell Williams, Councillor James Radcliffe, Councillor Jane Gebby, Councillor Janice Lewis. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I've lost my track of things here. Councillor James Radcliffe, Councillor Jane Gebby, Councillor Janice Lewis, Councillor John McCarthy, Councillor John Spanswick, Mayor, Councillor John Paul Blundell, Councillor Julia Williams, Councillor Kay Rowlands, Councillor Kenneth Watts, Councillor Lynn Walters, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor Matthew Voicey, Councillor Mike Clark, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Nicole Burnett, Councillor Nora Clark, Councillor Pam Davis, Councillor Paul Davis, Councillor Philip White, Councillor Richard Collins, Councillor Richard Young, Councillor Rod Shaw, Councillor Ross Sturman, Councillor Sadie Vidal, Councillor Sean Aspey, Councillor Sorrel Dendy, Councillor Stephen Smith, Councillor Stuart Baldwin, Councillor Tom Beadle, I think, Mr. Mayor, that, Councillor Ross Thomas, Councillor Tim Thomas. I think that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I can see Councillor Walters got a hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Tom Gifford will be joining the meeting, but he will be about 30 minutes late. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we haven't quite got to apologies yet, but okay, we'll do that now in a minute. Thank you. Can you please take your hand down, please? Thank you. Thank you, Mark. That's those in attendance. We'll now go through the agenda. Before I do, I'd just like to ask members if you're okay with moving item 6, contact Magana, test, track and trace, because Kelechi Noam and Dave Holland, they need to be away by 4 o'clock. So if you're okay with that, everybody, we look to bring item 6 immediately after item 3. Right, so first item then, apologies for absence. I'm aware of 3 so far: Councillor Altaf Hussain, Councillor Richard Granville, Councillor Jeff Tilsley, and Councillor David Lewis may be late because of IT issues. I take it Councillor Gifford as well may be late. Join the meeting later, as just announced. Any other apologies for absence? Councillor Amanda Williams.
Hi, thanks very much. I have to leave at 4 o'clock. My son was involved in an accident yesterday and he needs some emergency treatment this afternoon, so I'll be leaving at 4.
Okay, sorry about that. I hope everybody's okay. The best you can. And Councillor James Radcliffe.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear whether you've already received apologies for Councillor Malcolm James. And I too also have to leave the meeting at 4 o'clock, but for a less serious reason than that, I've just got another meeting.
So as Councillor Malcolm James, apologies as well. Okay, any further apologies? Councillor Walters.
Sorry, I need to leave the meeting at 5 o'clock.
Right.
Apologies.
Okay. Thank you. Right, no further apologies. Councillor Tim Thomas.
Yeah, only that I have to leave the meeting at 5 o'clock as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, no further apologies. Item 2 on the agenda, declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest from members or officers? Councillor Carla Webster.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to look at, so the item number 7, the revenue budget outturn, I do have to declare a personal interest that my son is in receipt of school transport, and that's mentioned in there.
Thank you. Any others? No, right, okay. Item 3 then, the approval of the minutes, 2 sets of minutes, approval of the minutes, the 24th of February.
Move.
Thank you.
Second, Chair.
Thank you. And then the minutes of the 10th of March 2021.
Move.
Thank you.
Second, Chair.
Thank you. Right, that's those 2 sets of minutes approved. Right, so as was just mentioned, we're looking now to bring item 6 to next on the agenda. So I can hand you over to I think Kelly's going to introduce Kelechi and Dave Holland. Kelechi Noam and Dave Holland for this interesting item on the agenda. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Kelly Watson, Monitoring Officer. Members, I'm not going to keep you too long on the recovering report today because I'm aware that when previously Kelechi and Dave have been with you, you have quite a lot of questions, and I think that will probably be the best use of their time. So just to inform you that the purpose of this report is to present the Cwm Taf Morgannwg Region Test, Trace, Protect COVID-19 Prevention and Response Plan 2021 to 2022 for you to note, and also to outline the contribution of the shared regulatory service in the delivery of that plan. I don't intend to take you through the report in any more detail. I'll just hand straight over to Kelechi and then to Dave, who can give you some brief updates, and then obviously we're all available to take any questions you have.
Can I first take a mover and a second for the report, please?
Move. Move, Chair. Second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Kelechi. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks very much for flexibility moving this item a bit earlier so I can get off to another crucial meeting, I suppose, at 4 o'clock. What I thought I would do was just use a few slides to sort of describe for the purpose of the conversation where we are today, and then the test, trace and protect plan that you already have sight of. Whatever questions or comments you may have, hopefully we can then contextualize it in terms of where we are today. So with your permission, I'll be really quick with this slide, so I won't take too much time, but I just relevant updates. So this is from the Public Health Wales data. So it's just setting out the breakdown of COVID-19 cases by local authority. So you can see the 3 local authorities within the health board area, but Bridgend here is currently at 19 per 100,000 in terms of cumulative incidents. And that compares with the all Wales average of 32.2 per 100,000. As you can see, the general pattern is that there is a general increase in most local authorities in numbers of cases, and that's why you would probably hear that we are now at the start of a 3rd wave. No one knows exactly what that 3rd wave is going to look like in detail, but the sense is that we're very much at the start of a 3rd wave, and Bridgend is currently at 19 per 100,000, which is a gentle increase from the previous 7-day reporting period. I always use this data to just describe the epidemic curve for Bridgend since March 2020, when the pandemic started, and you can see this was the 1st wave, and this was that very challenging 2nd wave that we have had at the end of last year, and this is where we currently are. Now, if you compared this to other local authorities in the Clontarf Morgannwg area, you will probably find it's flatter, because in Bridgend we have had a number of clusters recently. So this cluster here, we managed, and it was driven by a number of cases in schools. But we managed to get that down through joint efforts, as you can imagine. And there's a gentle creep in the numbers of cases, but you can see that's also flattened at this point. The general sense is that our rate of increase is much slower at this point, even though we're talking about a 3rd wave and the general increase across the country, but there's a very slow rate of increase at this point. And then this is looking at the positivity rates. So this is not the previous data. I was looking at general incidence rates, and this is just looking at the rates of positivity. And you can see that the positivity rates for Bridgend are currently about 1.8% of all tests that are done that are positive. And that itself is a reduction from the previous, which is great. Look at the 3 local authorities and look at their current trajectory. You can see that the Bridgend trajectory is the closest to the all Wales trajectory. It's the rate of increase has been slower in 2 other local authorities. But the point here is that you can see the steep increase that we had. When I say steep increase, it's important to put it in context, and that's why I showed the initial data showing the numbers are actually small numbers. So while we're talking about steep increases, it's generally small numbers, but that has slowed down more in more recent times. So we're hoping that we're successfully managing to slow. So it's not an inexorable march. It doesn't feel like an inexorable march into a 3rd wave at this point. Again, this is just describing the numbers of inpatient admissions and then community A&E and outpatient cases. And after that increase that we've had, you can see a gentle a sort of a stabilization. Do ignore the latter figures, because they won't always be correct. But the point here is that we've always been aware that whenever there's been an increase in community cases of COVID, within a matter of 2 weeks, we've seen hospital admissions rise, and that was the pattern during the 1st wave, was definitely the pattern during the 2nd wave. But we're not seeing that during this 3rd wave, and that is fundamentally down to the vaccination program. However, I always caution that is not to say that the vaccination program, that is not to say that there is clear evidence that the vaccination program has definitely delinked community cases from hospital cases, because any exponential rise in community cases that we get from this point is likely to result in increase in hospital admissions. But the current picture is good in the sense that we're not seeing NHS and social care overrun by cases as a result of the gentle rise that we've had in the community. But it's a picture that we keep on looking very carefully at. In terms of who is currently being infected, you can see how this has significantly changed from the previous waves. So we're now seeing the infection either in younger people who are at this point less likely to be vaccinated, or amongst older people. It is usually those who are either not vaccinated or who have only received one dose of the vaccination. So, and the national figures, I understand, is about 65% of those new cases are in people who have not been vaccinated. And again, that just underscores the importance and the success of the vaccination program in terms of preventing significant infections. This is just to reassure you. I think you've already seen some of the data, some of the plan in our TTP plan, how we're doing surveillance. So we continue to look at surveillance on a small geography basis. And you can see over here, this is just looking at the numbers of positive cases. That's what this map is presenting, numbers of positive cases by lower super output area. So here in Bridgend, you can see how there is, and this might look like that here is a focus of infection here, but be mindful that this is just probably about 4 cases or thereabouts. So these are small numbers. When we were in the second wave, this particular map, which we look at every day, was very, very instrumental in terms of giving us a sense of where we're having hotspots. And then we can pursue those hotspots with mobile testing units and get more testing done in those places. So that's just to reassure you that we continue to look at the patterns of infection at small area levels. Again, this is another way we do our local surveillance. So in Bridgend, we look at the built-up areas, and for each of those built-up areas, we present these charts with controls. I call them the upper confidence limits and lower confidence limits. That sort of tells us when any incidents in each of these built-up areas is going outside of our control limits. And that then draws our attention to that this is an area that we need to either better understand what's going on, what's driving rising infections, and how we can intervene with more intelligence, if you like. And again, this is, again, another output from our local surveillance system where we're now looking at each of these, we're looking at the trajectory of infection by age group. So I've only just pulled out one. So in 0 to 15, it's going down. If I pulled out the 16 to 29s, that's where you see that it's gone up. But this is just an extract from the surveillance output. And finally, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on vaccination, where we are with vaccination. So currently we've vaccinated very easily over 75 to 80% of our population, which is very good. I mean, the ONS does say that 8 in 10 adults in Britain are now immune to COVID, either by natural infection or by immunization. So which is good if that data is accurate, and I have no reason to think it is not. But what we've been doing, therefore, has been looking at potential inequities in vaccine uptake. So this data, essentially on the vertical axis, what we have here is cumulative incidence in 20 to 59-year-olds. So the population that is more likely to have been covered by vaccination largely. We're looking at the incidence of COVID cumulatively from wave 1 of the pandemic, and then plotting that against the difference in vaccine uptake by middle super output area. So middle super output areas are larger units of geography of about 15,000 each. And what we're doing is looking at the middle super output areas or geographies that have had the highest incidence of COVID since wave 1 and comparing that with their uptake of vaccination. Now, essentially what we're looking for is places where the uptake of vaccination program is lower than the CTM average, and that's combined with those places having had high cumulative incidence. Now, to reassure you, there's no Bridgend MSOA, there's no Bridgend locality that falls into that area of interest. These two are the key ones. So this MSOA that ends in 415 and the one that ends in 286 it shouldn't really interest you very much, because there are 2 MSOAs in Merthyr Tydfil. In no area in Bridgend is represented here, but I just wanted to use it to give you a sense of how we're looking at vaccine uptake inequalities and making sure we're balancing that with a sense of previous exposure to COVID starting from wave 1. I just wanted to use that, Chair, as just a very quick introduction to set the context. I'm not going to repeat what you already have in the paper. I'm assuming everyone has read the paper as Kelly introduced, and I'm very happy to take questions either on the context that I've just described or on the paper itself. I don't know whether Dave wants to come in first before you take questions. I'm available from this point. Thank you.
Okay, Dave, do you have anything to add before the questions?
Yes, Councillor, if I can. Hopefully councillors are aware that in that communicable disease framework, there are 3 key players. The Director of Public Health, which Kelechi has performed admirably over the last 15 months, a lead consultant in communicable disease, and Heather Lewis and Andrew Jones have delivered that aspect. And then the role of Director of Public Protection, which is the one that you've assigned to me as a council, and to coordinate the activities of particularly our environmental health teams and trading standards teams. But the document is a partnership approach. That's the subtitle to it. And I think, Kelechi, it's fair to say that our traditional 3-way partnership has expanded far beyond that. And some of the efforts of the staff of Bridgend Council have been admirable. You know, the pulling together and the delivery mechanisms to protect the people of Bridgend have been fantastic. I've been doing this job a long time, and the partnership work has surpassed anything I've ever seen, Councillor. I would say that, you know, coronaviruses are not new, but this strain has had a huge impact, hasn't it? And we've seen businesses close. We've seen people told to work from home where possible, and we've actually been told that you can't have people in your own house. I mean, these are, the word unprecedented is used a lot, isn't it? But these were things that, you know, we hadn't experienced before. So quite impactful. And we've seen, you know, Kelechi's shown you some of the infection rates. At one time, Bridgend was in a very dark place. It was one of the highest in the country, England and Wales, and some of the work we had to do there was quite challenging. But the numbers have come down, and Bridgend, in football parlance, remains now in the relegation threatened zone, and that's where we needed to be in infection rates. We don't want to be challenging for a European place again. So in the report, Councillor, I mentioned some of the work we've done in paragraph 4.10, our JET team. Many of you councillors will know Matthew Jones. He's done a splendid job in coordinating work with the police. I also have on the call with me Jane Peaty. Jane has been instrumental in the test, trace and protect elements, interfacing with Cwmtaf Morgannwg, and doing some fantastic work around care homes and schools as well. And if members want any more detail on that, Jane would be available to talk to you about that. So I think, Councillor, I will stop now. And if there are questions, then Kelechi and I will do our best to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Kelechi. And as you say, there's a comprehensive report in our pack, as well as the slides that Kelechi has just shown us. I'm sure there'll be some questions, and there are people that put their hands up. So we'll go first to Councillor Tim Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I go to point, excuse me, 4.10 of the report about the JET team, Joint Enforcement Team, which is made up of the Shared Regulatory Service and colleagues in South Wales Police. I note that there's quite a few opportunities to issue fixed penalty notices. I'm just wondering, going hand in hand with that, is there any opportunities to provide education to change some people's behaviour? I know, unfortunately, you'll never change some cohorts of people's behaviour who do breach the regulations, but I'm just wondering if there's an educational element to enforcement as well. And secondly, I'm just interested really where the actual fixed penalty notice revenue, where does that money actually go to? Thanks.
Okay, so I'll answer the first part of the question. Our approach is always to start with advice, always has been, then perhaps to move to the persuade phase. And if that fails, then we will go to enforcement. I can tell you that Matthew and his team have issued 121 improvement notices under the regulations designed to improve COVID-safe practices in premises. And we failed 7 times, Councillor, because we closed 7 premises. You know, that persuasion and that appeal to people to do the right thing failed 7 times. And we've closed 7 premises. We have issued some fixed penalty notices, and that revenue then goes back into the shared regulatory service and back consequently to Bridgend's funding of that service.
Chair, if I may come in support of what Dave said. In the report, you'll see that there was a section where we listed 8 different components of the overall program, and the last one in that report was the risk communication and community engagement work stream of our TTP program. Now, that work stream we set up very early as we were setting up the TTP program because we recognized the importance of education. At some point in time, we were obviously going to be enforcing the restrictions and regulations as we did through the joint enforcement teams. But as Dave said, we always wanted a very carefully balanced approach that recognized that education was as important as enforcement, and you would only use enforcement when it was necessary. So I hope that sort of gives you the assurance that we used a very, very balanced approach and really emphasize the importance of education and behavior change.
Okay, thank you for that. It was remiss of me, I wasn't sure whether the leader or chief exec would like to say anything about the report or wait till the end. No, okay, we'll carry on with questions then and we'll bring them in at the end. Councillor Alex Williams next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I'd just like to say thanks to Kelechi and Dave for the presentation and the report. You showed during your report a map of hotspots, and on page 83 of our pack, you mentioned that epidemiological surveillance is key to the test, track and trace program going forward. Now, the Delta variant clearly is causing some concern with members of our community and is already emerging as a threat, not just across the whole of Wales, but across communities in BCBC and further afield. So I know this question has been asked on numerous occasions, but do we have any ward level data which would indicate where this particular variant is prevalent? Because clearly you mentioned during your report that you may be stepping back from the test, track and trace program if restrictions are released on July the 19th. However, you will still maintain some kind of presence if a surge emerges, as a third wave in the autumn. So potentially for us as community leaders, it may be important for us to communicate where the data or where the incidences of the Delta variant is prevalent, so we can communicate that to our constituents to be perhaps more careful in those areas. So I wondered whether you could share with us some more granular data which we can communicate across our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. The national figures suggest that 70 to 80% of current infections that are sequenced through whole genome sequencing, 70 to 80% of them turn out to be the Delta variant. So clearly it is the dominant circulating strain. In Cwmtaf Morgannwg, across our 3 local authorities, obviously including Bridgend, 100% of all of the samples that are sequenced, infections that are sequenced, are the Delta variant. So in the early days where the Delta variant and the Alpha variant were jostling for prominence and dominance, that might have been useful. At this point, I am not clear about the utility of that. If 100% of our samples that are sequenced, I do have to add, we're not sequencing 100% of samples. No part of the world is sequencing 100% of its samples, but of all the samples that we are sequencing, 100% of them in CTM, in Cwmtaf Morgannwg, in Bridgend, are the Delta variant. So there is no doubt at all as to what variant is circulating in Bridgend. It is the Delta variant. Having said that, we have always been aware that the Delta variant is 40% more transmissible, 2.5 more times more likely than the Alpha variant to result in hospital admissions. So we've always known those attributes. But the good thing is that in spite of those attributes, in spite of the fact that we know it to be more transmissible, the fact is that we're not getting a very, very steep or exponential increase in cases in Bridgend, nor are we getting any significant increase in hospital admissions. So I hope that gives you some reassurance, but I'm happy to take on any follow-up question, Councillor Williams.
Councillor Williams, do you have any further?
I suppose my question is, for example, I represent Pencoed. You know, if there were a spike in Pencoed as opposed to an area of Porthcawl, for example, or Llanvy Valley, etc., perhaps it would be, you know, useful for us to have that granular level of data to provide that to our constituents. So, you know, I don't know whether you can provide that. If so, I think it would be useful to all councillors that if a spike were to occur in a certain area of Bridgend County Borough and not another, then I think it would be useful for that data to be passed on to us if possible.
Yes, so definitely we will, and part of one of the slides I showed in my slide pack was how we get data on every case at a local level. So if there was a spike, for example, in Pencoed, that will show up. We'll look at that map data on a daily basis. I suppose that's a slightly different thing from us being able to map every Delta case by locality, because not every one of our positive cases are whole genome sequenced. So if there are 10 cases in Pencoed, for example, perhaps about 4 of them will be sequenced. And what I'm saying is that from the data, those 4 would come back to be Delta variants. So whilst we can provide you information on those 10 cases, we may not be able to tell you that 10 of those cases were Delta. We will be able to tell you that of the 4 that were sequenced, 4 were Delta. Does that make sense? So, but that absolutely data on small area geography and total numbers of infections, we'll be able to provide you on a daily basis. It might be more challenging to then do that on the basis of the Delta variant itself.
Okay, thank you, Kelechi. Dave, do you have anything to add?
Well, only to support Kelechi's observations about how quickly the Delta variant has moved. In the early part of May, we had a cluster in a school, over 20 cases, all were the Alpha variant, the Kent variant. We're not seeing it now, and that's what, some 5 weeks, how quickly the Delta variant has become the dominant variant, and it is far more capable of moving through Bridgend than the Alpha variant ever was.
Okay, thank you. We move on to the next. A couple of questions. A couple of people have indicated now. Perhaps 6, 7, 8, in fact. Councillor James Radcliffe, next then, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and a very interesting presentation. I think the key message is get the vaccine when you're offered it. My question is relating to test and trace and contact tracing, and I'm wondering whether there's been any monitoring of compliance with the order to isolate for contacts of an infected case, and whether there's any evidence that compliance is declining over the recent months, as some people think that as prevalence has gone lower, wider, they may become a bit more complacent or whatever. And the second question I have is, I always think there should be a chance for a sinner to repent. So if there is somebody who refused a vaccine a few months ago when they were offered it, is there going to be an opportunity for them to change their mind and get the vaccine? And is there going to be associated publicity around that to really drive those numbers up as high as possible and to really tackle vaccine hesitancy?
Yes. On the issue of compliance, we have always had data, local data on compliance, and we've always had sort of variable compliance. But generally compliance has been high all through this pandemic. It hasn't been always 100%, but there isn't any recent indication. I'm so sorry. I'm getting. This is the disbenefit of working from home. Somebody's trying to slam down my door. Give me 10 seconds, please.
Shall I come in and try and supplement that answer?
If you can, please, Dave.
Okay, so the process we have is, as cases are recorded through the Test, Trace and Protect scheme, people would be contacted and instructed to isolate now for 10 days. telephone calls will be made on a regular basis to make sure that these people are isolated. They also form part of a welfare check as well, just to make sure things are going according to plan. But we do know that some people will answer that telephone call, will say they're in the house, and then immediately put the phone down and go out. And that's why one of the reasons the joint enforcement teams were created, so that people would be aware there were consequences to it. It is a police enforcement function. And as I mentioned earlier, Matthew, with that joint team, will receive information from TTP and will go and chase those people who are flaunting the law. The other side of that, of course, is that we also challenge any businesses where people decide they are free to go into work. The businesses will be required to send them home, or they will face penalties. Sorry, Kelechi, I'm just trying to catch that first part of me.
Thank you. I see you finished the question on the compliance. So I'll pick up the vaccine hesitancy one and second chance for people. Emphatically, yes. So, Councillor Radcliffe, I think we're at this point now. We're doing sort of mop-up. I wouldn't call them mop-up clinics, walk-in clinics, and it's an opportunity for people who may have missed their previous opportunity to have another one. I don't think we're starting in Bridgend, but the one we're currently doing will at least give us a sense of how well that is taken up. And then again, like I said, I presented data earlier showing that some of our uptake deficiencies or defects or deficits are more in Merthyr than in Bridgend. But if it works well in where we're doing it, then I think it's something that we want to make do more of across Community of Morgannog, including Bridgend. So yes, the answer to the question is yes. We recognize that sometimes people will change their minds, and we're trying to create opportunities for them to do it.
Okay, thank you, Kelechi. Next, we can bring in the leader, please, Councillor David.
Yeah, thanks. Just in response to your request earlier for myself, for the Chief Executive to come in, and certainly on that last point, I think, Kelechi, what we would say is that it is never too late to get the vaccine. Please change your mind if you're hesitant about it. And there's practical reasons, because we know obviously in these initial rounds of vaccine appointments, people have been offered a specific appointment, and there may have been work or care commitments. People might have been unwell, why they weren't able to make that first appointment. So please get in touch. It is a very, very safe vaccine, isn't it, Kelechi? And I'm sure you can speak to that and reassure all our members about the safety of it and the risk that is still there for people who do not take the vaccine and don't have the vaccine. That is very clearly shown by the data that Kelechi has shared with us earlier about the demographics of the people who are still, there are still people who are being admitted to hospital, and still some people that require serious acute care because they've been infected by COVID. They are much more likely to be younger people, aren't they, Kelechi? And they're certainly much more likely to be people who have not been vaccinated, because the vaccine provides such a high level of protection to people. Just on Councillor Williams's point, Councillor Alex Williams's point around the ward level data, we have in the past, haven't we, shared with the public when there's been spikes in certain areas. So, for example, in the Garw Valley, recently in Porthcawl. So we will continue to do that, where it helps the local communities understand if they're at particular risk. However, there is an issue, isn't there? Perhaps you can touch on it, Kelechi and Dave, around patient confidentiality when numbers are particularly low. So we haven't, at certain stages in the pandemic, been able to share ward level data, because it literally is an individual, and we have to be careful that it doesn't enable identification of that individual. But rest assured, Dave and Kelechi and the rest of the team and the consultants study that data at that granular level on a daily basis, because that is actually the key information, is that granularity, because it could be that there's certain risks in certain parts of the borough and not in others, and we need to be able to continually map that and respond to those risks. So that does happen. And then on Councillor Tim Thomas's point, Dave, I'm sure the message to any business or organisation out there is, if they've got any questions at all, please get in touch with us, because we know that the regulations continue to change. We know it's difficult. We know there's a raft of rules there, but we're there. The Shared Regulatory Service prides itself on providing that information, support and advice to businesses and organisations. Enforcement is always the last resort, but we will enforce if people don't listen and take the advice and take the warnings and improve. But thankfully, the vast majority of businesses and organisations in Bridgend, Dave, have been brilliant in the way that they've complied with the regulations. And can I just say that David described Kelechi as admirable in his response. He certainly has been, and so has Dave and all the team in the Shared Regulatory Service. They have gone above and beyond, and they've worked, it feels like sometimes 24/7. So I wanted to place that on record. And they don't always get the cooperation and the courtesy that they deserve. Sometimes we've had real aggression, haven't we, from members of the public, whether that's through TTP, through enforcement. But thankfully, we're also working very closely with South Wales Police. And again, they have been excellent in the way that they work very closely with us, certainly on the enforcement side. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Leader. Anything further to add, Kelechi, or should I move on to the next?
Just very quickly to just say thank you, Councillor David. I mean, completely agree with you. The point you made about what level data and small numbers is absolutely correct. And the reason I showed the surveillance maps was just to give you assurance that, and I want these as small numbers, because where we are right now is relatively small numbers, relatively, but it's just to give you assurance that there is a system that is in place, and we tested that system significantly during the second wave, where we had very much higher numbers, and we've continued to put that system in place, keep that system in place throughout this period. So hopefully that will serve us usefully into the future, whatever the third wave looks like. And just one very quick point about safety of the vaccines. I don't mind saying this. I keep on whenever I'm approaching, I think about probability. And when we used to counsel people, when I was in clinical practice, I used to counsel people about sickle cell disease and say 1 in 4. Yeah, so if a couple are both carriers, 1 in 4 chance. But what does 1 in 4 chance mean? Mathematically, that is 25%. But what does it mean for the individual? The point around AstraZeneca, people talk about AstraZeneca and blood clots. It is always important to set that the likelihood of dying from a blood clot from AstraZeneca currently is about 3 in 1 million. The likelihood of sitting in my room and getting hit and killed by an airplane crashing into my living room is 8 in a million. And that just helps people contextualize it. But having said that, I recognize that as an individual, I would always ask, could I be that 1 in the million? Could I be that 3 in the million? And so it's all about balancing. But these are safe vaccines. They're very effective vaccines, and they are our best chance of coming out of this pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Kelechi. We've got 5 more speakers, and I appreciate this because it's 4:45 and do need to leave by 4, so we'll take these 5 and then we'll sum up. So next one is Councillor Paul Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's a question for a comment and a question for Dave. I think does best, Chair. Go back to Tim Thomas's point, Chair. I started on enforcement in East Bottorba Council as enforcement officer in 2007 and did that job for 7.5 years. So I do know I'm talking when it comes to enforcement. I'm going to go back to enforcement here for a minute. As for education, before I started, there was a sort of campaign of education, but obviously at some point you need to start enforcing, and which it was when I began. For example, the beach bylaws that they introduced down Aberafan Beach, the month before they came into force every year, we used to go down, and talk to people and try to advise people that they were coming in and put the signage up. All this sort of stuff goes on, So that's what the education side of it. But I would like to ask a more direct question to Dave here. Section 33 offences, Environmental Protection Act, fly tipping, Dave, and littering and other fixed penalties is included really in this. It's easy to give fixed penalty notices out, we can say like confetti. It's simple. What happens when people don't pay those notices is the difficult bit. The same with fly tipping. You find the person. Sometimes it's easy to find the person, sometimes it's difficult. But when you do locate an offender, the process to court, how simple is this going to be? Because that is the difficult bit of these offences. Some people will pay them fixed penalties, probably 70% people will pay them. Just that's the end of that. But that 30% who don't pay them, the fly tipping people who, where there's a fixed penalty for fly tipping, I'll tell a lie, there wasn't when I started. They don't pay. What happens then? Have we got a process in place, where we can put the file together, get it illegal, and get it into court to resolve these, outstanding problems?
What do you, Dave? Is it Dave on this one?
Well, the short answer, Councillor, is yes.
Good.
and Kelly is on the call and would probably be able to also contribute to that. But yes, I mean, if we feel that enforcement is appropriate and necessary, we will go after it. As the leader of the council has just said, we have seen a number of people in the pandemic claim to be registered to take away waste. Clearly not, and we've been pursuing those. Unfortunately, cases are not going through the courts as quickly as we might like. As you know, the courts are operating under difficult circumstances now. They are taking the more serious cases, but some cases that I lodged back last April have still yet to come into court because of the prioritisation.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that. Thanks for the response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Right, on to the next question is Councillor Lynn Walters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kelechi and Dave, for your updates and your reports. I'm particularly concerned about the ongoing vaccination programme and the efficiency of the programme. So in points, well, first of all, it's very good to hear that all the metrics are being delved into and shared with BCBC, because that gives comfort that appropriate plans can be put in place. But on vaccinations, the letters that go out are a Wales-wide letter, and the only changes are name, address, time, date, and vaccination centre. That's the only thing, and a cancellation number is on there for people to contact. Now, I know CumTAF have worked really hard and have now developed an online cancellation form and rebooking. The problem is that information is not on the letter that comes through the door to the general public. And BCBC have been making every effort in communicating out that information out through regular updates to the public. But again, not all of our residents are signed up to those updates. So for people who haven't turned up for their vaccine, it could be they don't want it. It could be that they live in Bridgend, but they work in Cardiff, Newport, Swansea, wherever, and then their employers, or whatever else they're doing, they can't actually get back to the vaccination centres in time. So what steps are being made to engage with Welsh Government so that CumTAF can have its own letters going out, probably centrally, which has got the excellent cancellation and rebooking facility details on that letter, because I think the vaccine uptake will be far better if that process is implemented. It is more efficient. It will take resource away from the telephone line. And when we come into having booster jabs later on, we then have a slicker process to actually help that process through.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Kelechi,
Thank you, Councillor Walters. I don't have the answer to that question, but what I will do, if you don't mind, is that I'll take it back to the vaccination teams. I've written it down very carefully. I'll take it back to the vaccination teams, and I will take the action to revert to you in an email just to say I have done this and this is what they've said and this is what they're going to do. Is that okay?
That would be wonderful, and I'm happy to share the experience I've had at the vaccination centres as to exactly what is happening, and real life conversations that I've had with people who have struggled to change their vaccination appointments, if that will help.
Okay, that's very clearly heard. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll take it back. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Waters. Very interesting. And we now move on to Councillor Ross Thomas, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr.
Mayor. Thomas, sorry.
Thank you to Kelechi and Dave for their report as well. Dave, I concur with your opening remarks really about the performance of the team. It must be like nailing down an amoeba, trying to sort of deal with all the changing regulations on a daily basis. They were 3 weekly, but they've been coming daily now. So in my dealings with officers, they've been nothing other than informative and helpful. So a big congratulations to your team. So the First Minister has said himself that we're on the cusp of a third wave. I recognise that perhaps hospital admissions mightn't be so high, or certainly the acute nature of the infection mightn't be so bad. But we still need to keep a lid on transmission. I think we all agree there. However, I think it's fair to say that test, trace, protect is in the minds of many people, probably too many, is something of the past. There is this forward-looking regime, obviously looking forward to regulations being eased and restrictions being eased. Few people are thinking of anything else other than the reopening of society as we perhaps knew it. So I'm wondering what the plans are to re-raise awareness of TTP to help reduce transmission, either in response to the Delta variant or anything else that we might unfortunately face in this coming autumn or winter period. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
So I think it's an interesting question. I do have to say I'm not entirely sure if it is an altogether bad thing that TTP increasingly recedes from the minds of people. And the reason I say that is because TTP for us is an administrative response to a pandemic. And we always said to people that we are hoping that we'll get to a point, particularly through an effective vaccination program, where we'll bring back some sense of normality to people. I think we do need to, as a country, give people hope that lockdowns have not been risk-free. Communities have suffered from lockdown itself. So I think we need to begin to give people some hope. And if part of that hope is that you can get back to some form of normality, and part of getting back to some form of normality is get your vaccination program. If we're successfully able to vaccinate 80 to 90% of our population, we will be easily in herd immunity and people can get back to some form of normality. So if you asked me as Director of Public Health, am I worried that people aren't thinking about TTP? No, I'm not. I don't want them to think very much about TTP. I want to just be assured that we have the resources to bring back TTP program in its fullness if we need to, and we probably don't need the public worrying about TTP for us to be able to successfully do that. That's something we have to collectively commit to as Welsh Government, local authority, health board, and other stakeholders. So perhaps I hope I'm answering your question. I'm probably not too worried about that, but I think if we can use the opportunity we have now to encourage people in our communities, take up your vaccination program, that is our best way out of it, and people can get back into some form of normality without having to worry too much about TTP.
Thank you, Kelechi. Can we move on to Councillor Sorrell Dendy next?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, just to come off the back of the point Councillor Walters made, when the letters have been sent out, I know of a couple of people, especially one gentleman, who received a letter for a vaccination who was bedbound to go to another location to get it. And when he phoned up to cancel that appointment, he wasn't given information on how to get a home appointment. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at as well, you know, for people who can't attend vaccination centres. But my main comment is enforcement of businesses and education is extremely positive. However, I'm finding a rising lack of compliance on public transport and a lack of confidence and safety on it in terms of cleaning the buses between journeys, people not adhering to seating arrangements. There are limitations that drivers have in ensuring restrictions and guidelines are enforced themselves. I just want to know how this is being tackled, as I understand the difficulties of tracking and observing these issues. But I'd be interested to know on how this is monitored, especially since those using these services are the older and younger members of the communities.
I don't know if Dave or Jane had a view on this. I think it is clearly. Dave, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, I mean, there are distinct provisions in the Regulation Council around transport, around buses, around taxis and so ever, and they sit with the police. So I don't want to sound like I'm copping out. It is a police function. But once again, that joint enforcement team, as those issues are referred to them, they work together to get that improvement we need. It's just getting that information through. It's a very small team covering the borough. They can't be everywhere. And so any information flow that we can receive means that we will react to it.
Okay, thank you for that. And last but not least, we sum up, is Councillor Disha Patel. I notice the time isn't, we're getting close to 4 o'clock, and I understand Kelechi needs to move. So Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it was more of a comment. I just wanted to put on record my thanks to everyone working on the TTP. I'm especially proud of the way we've run it in Wales. Speaking to colleagues across the border, I know that this collaborative approach between local authority, health and even the police is something that they envy. So just wanted to say thank you. And also I've had a number of text messages and messages from Councillor David White, who has I'm sad he's not here, but he is absolutely glowing about the SRS's help with community centres and the guidance that they've provided those groups that run the community centres, as well as those groups that access the community centres. And I know we've spoken a lot about business support, but I just wanted to remind those groups that are out there that are looking at reforming and using community facilities that there is still advice available for you if you want to get in touch with the SRS, basically. So that was it from me, and I'm just looking at the time with 1 minute to spare. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Leader, I don't know if a leader would like to sum up, or Chief Exec, anybody? If not, no. Before Councillor David, leader. Oh, hang on.
I think Councillor Patel has covered most of it, and I'm sure the Chief Executive will want to come in, but to thank the staff within Bridgend Company Borough Council, as well as Health Board and shared regulatory staff. It truly has been a partnership effort, and whilst we have optimism because of the world-class vaccination programme we've got in Wales, and it is the best not just in the UK, not just in Europe, but in the world at the moment, and that is absolutely fundamental to the long-term solution to the challenge that's still presented by COVID. but we're not there yet, and we still need to maintain that vigilance, don't we? And continue to set a good example. And I know members are setting very good examples, and make sure that we continue to socially distance, we continue to wear face coverings, and that way we can continue to minimise the spread as the vaccination programme continues at a remarkable pace. And that is how hopefully we can return to a level of normality that we will recognise, whilst keeping our citizens safe as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Mark, did you want to say anything? Yep, Mark Shepherd, Chief
Very
Executive.
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I'm very conscious Kelechi needs to leave, but just it would be remiss for me not to also thank them, but just to make the point that both Dave and Kelechi were very busy gentlemen pre-pandemic, and so everything you've heard today and everything you heard about them doing is of course additional. I suppose it's illustrative really of how adaptive and committed they have been and their teams have been to keep us safe. And so just with that, and I know it's been made by other people, just to thank them for all they've done for us over the last 15 months as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and I just like to echo those comments, but I know Kelechi and Dave here today, but there's a lot of work behind the scenes over and above this report. But a massive thank you, I think, to the service, the shared regulatory services, the local authority, and all the staff involved, Welsh Government. But the one group perhaps sometimes we do appreciate, but forget about, is the volunteers. And there's an army of volunteers out there over the last year or so, helping make this work. So a massive thank you to everybody concerned for making this work, because we've still got a way to go to beat it, but we're on the right track. So thank you, Kelechi. Thank you, Dave. You're welcome to stay, but no, Kelechi has to leave for another meeting. So
thank you very much. Thanks, bye everyone. Bye.
Okay, bye. Okay, members, we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda now then. Receive announcement from myself first off. The first one of many, well, many for a year anyway. So thanks. So item 4, the morning after the AGM, believe it or not, in fact it was the evening of the AGM, I was told there was a meeting the following morning. So I was attended remote meeting with KPC Youth, with a cuppa and a chat. So the usual thing, where there's lots of these remote meetings, which was a regular get together them. It was lovely to virtually meet with all the dedicated volunteers at KPC Youth in Kennelly, and you heard about their current initiatives. And it was a really positive start to a mayoral year on day 1, which shows things are changing, thankfully. The Deputy Mayor myself then collected our change of office in a short private ceremony in the Mayor's Parlour with my wife, Mayoress, and the Chief Executive and the Leader, and many photos were taken. Apparently that's part and parcel of what you have to do. As part of Volunteers Week then, I was invited to the Zone in Bridgend Town Centre. As you're probably aware, this is a family centre that has been set up to support all members of the community, with the volunteers providing support and guidance on a whole range of issues. It was interesting to meet the staff and learn how they have adjusted and carried on right through the pandemic. In a similar vein, they also the following week visited the Bridgend Carer Centre doing Carers Week. We to say thank you to all the staff who just do such an amazing job all year round. And they've got a big job at hand of their garden at the rear of the centre there, which has some work to do. Other events in the calendar, the weekend just gone, I visited Park Slip Nature Reserve on Saturday morning with Iolo Williams, our famous nature broadcaster. He was doing a live online event on YouTube or Facebook or some online thing. I thought it was BBC, but it was actually an online live thing. And the Leader was there, Hugh Davis, a member of the Senate, and Chris Elmo, the MP, was there. And dare I say, the Leader was very interested in green spaces and protection of our verges and looking after our wildlife. And he had a long chat with Iolo afterwards, I believe. So look out what's going to come there. And just this week, there was lunch with the High Sheriff at Miskimano Hotel with the Leader, along with the representatives, the leaders and Mayor of RCT and Merthyr as well. That's Jeff Edwards, to see what his plans are for the year. In terms of charity fundraising, I think I've mentioned before, but I'm in the process of arranging events, all on behalf of Lads and Dads and Bridgend Carer Centre. And so far, at this moment in time, there are one definite date and another provisional date. So on Saturday, 13th of August, my wife, the Mayoress, has volunteered I say volunteered. I booked her in without asking, a tandem skydive from Swansea Airport. So she'll be doing a tandem skydive. I'll be staying firmly on the floor, feet on the floor, and she's looking to raise funds for Mayor's charities. And I must say, all the funds are raised, every single penny will be going to charities. All the costs involved with any event to do, I'll be covering the costs. So every penny donated will go to the charities at the end of the year. The other big event I'm trying to arrange is Mayor's Three Peaks Challenge, Welsh Three Peaks Challenge. Was looking at September. It's more likely now to be April to allow organisation of the event and give people a chance to get training through the winter and do a bit of walking, and then sign up to the Welsh Three Peaks Challenge. We'll be looking for at least 2 minibuses using Bridgend voluntary transport. So I'll be looking for people to come forward, put their names forward, putting a deposit down, and taking part in the Welsh Three Peaks Challenge on behalf of Mayor's charity. Finally, on the charity, if you'd like to make a donation at the moment in support of the fundraising, you can do so by going onto the Mayor's page on the BCBC website, click on the charity button. This will then direct you to a donations page where you can pay with a card. Just once again, as a reminder, the charities are Lads and Dads. We're looking at men's mental well-being for all ages from 18 to 108, and Bridgend Carer Centre. In due course, I will produce a sponsor form for those that perhaps would rather the traditional way of putting their name and committing to some pounds on a piece of paper, and I'll find a way of collecting the cash, don't you worry. So thank you, and let's hope you can support these charities in the year ahead. So moving on now then to members of Cabinet announcements. First one, Deputy Leader next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good luck with getting your Deputy Mayoress into the aeroplane. I don't think I'll have half a chance of getting my wife into an aeroplane. That's all right at 5,000 feet. Yeah. Right. My announcement is regarding the new community recycling facility at Village Farm Industrial Estate in Pyle. So work is about to start on improving the entrance into Village Farm Industrial Estate at Pyle. This is being carried out ahead of the planned opening of the estate's all-new community recycling centre later this year. To improve traffic flow and avoid congestion and prevent vehicles from queuing, an all-new dedicated lane for turning into and out of the estate off the A48 is being created. As part of the works, new traffic lights have been installed and the road at Hale Mostyn will be resurfaced. The improvements are expected to take up to 12 weeks to complete, and every effort is being made to minimise inconvenience. When it opens later this year, the new community recycling centre will feature parking bays for 31 cars, on-site queuing capacity for up to 72 vehicles at a time, and easier access with new bypass lanes. So I look forward to bringing you more details as this project develops. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Moving on now to Cabinet Member of Communities, Councillor Baldwin, Stuart Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope you have as much success in your fundraising and as much fun as I did with my fundraising. I've just got one announcement today, and it's in relation to that members might want to remind their constituents that a public consultation is underway on proposals which could see a new onshore wind farm developed on the land between Llynfi and the Avon Valleys. Called Y Bryn, the wind farm development has been proposed by the energy companies Coriolis Energy and ESB. If successful, this scheme promises to deliver enough clean energy to power more than 125,000 homes. However, there would be a significant visual impact, as at 250 metres high, the proposed turbines would be the tallest seen so far in the UK. At this stage, the project involves up to 26 turbines and associated infrastructure as a battery storage facility, on-site substations and access tracks. It would be split between 2 forestry blocks on land owned by Welsh Government and managed by Natural Resources Wales. It is important to note that this project has not been proposed by either Bridgend or Neath Port Talbot councils, and the final say on whether it goes ahead or not will fall to Welsh Government. Public exhibitions are underway. One was held last Monday at Maesteg Rugby Football Club, and a second will take place in Kevin Cribble Athletic Club between 1 and 7 p.m. on Thursday, the 24th of June. So if you can get her there tomorrow. A website has also been set up to offer full details about the project, as well as information on various ways in which residents can have their say. You can find this at www.abryn-windfarm.cymru. I hope that people will make full use of this opportunity to study the proposals in closer detail, ask questions and have their say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Next is Cabinet Member of Social Services and Early Help, Councillor Nicole Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The leader and I recently visited a number of our domiciliary care staff at settings ranging from Bryncethin Depot and the Glencomfig facility in Kemfig, and also some fabulous new purpose-built supported living units in Maesteg. We wanted to thank staff personally for the fantastic work that they are continuing to carry out and for the important role that they're playing within our communities. The visits coincided with a report produced by Care Inspectorate Wales on the domiciliary support service, and I was absolutely delighted to read how positive it was. Inspectors highlighted how everyone they spoke to was complimentary of our care staff and felt that they provided a service that met their needs. They praised the clear management structure, good support and development opportunities for our care staff, and the positive feedback from staff was that they felt valued and supported. People receiving care and support also told inspectors how they were confident in allowing care workers into their homes because they followed all hygiene practices. I am the leader, Cabinet, and I'm sure you are all hugely proud of our care teams and the commitment and dedication that they continue to demonstrate, which has been reflected in the comments from the people that they support. At any one time, there are around 1,200 users of our domiciliary care service, and we're actively encouraging more people to take a closer look at how they might become part of our domiciliary support team, and more information is available on our BCBC website. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next, Cabinet Member for Wellbeing and Future Generations, Councillor Denisha Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as you mentioned, earlier this month, volunteers' contributions were marked as part of the 37th Annual Volunteering Week, which sought to thank volunteers and acknowledge their efforts to help support our communities. Members may be interested to know that more than 1,500 people living in the county borough are currently registered as volunteers with Bridgend Association, a voluntary organisation. We've all seen how volunteers have come into their own during the coronavirus pandemic, whether it be through welfare calls, shopping for groceries, collecting medicines, giving people lifts to appointments, or the ongoing support for the vaccination programme. We are all aware of the important role that volunteers have played. Volunteers continue to play an important role in all aspects of community life. So I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to them and to let them know how much we appreciate their support and help. We remain incredibly grateful for all their support and dedication, and anyone who wishes to find out more about volunteering opportunities should visit the BAVO website. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration, Councillor Charles Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Construction specialists Knight Brown are making strong progress on the £6.4 million flood defence scheme, which will defend Porthcawl from any potential future rise in sea levels. They've set up a compound on land at Salt Lake and have commenced the first phase of the work, which is focusing on the iconic Western Breakwater. As the internal structure of the 200-year-old breakwater still features its original wooden core, It needs extensive renovation and refurbishment to ensure that it can continue to stand up to the tides and tough maritime weather conditions. Knights Brown have also commenced upgrading the Eastern Promenade to create improved flood defences between Porthcawl Marina and Coney Beach. The work will then extend into Sandy Bay and as far as Freech Point, where flood defences and dune protection works will be carried out. The project will help secure future development in the Salt Lake area of Porthcawl, while keeping more than 500 existing homes and over 170 businesses safe. Mr. Mayor, plans for Cosy Corner are also progressing. Visit Wales is processing a £1 million funding application, and the council has agreed to match this with an additional £885,000. Planned facilities include an all-new stone and glass clad building offering new premises suitable for retail and startup enterprises, meeting space for community use, a facility for the Sea Cadets, an office for the Harbour Master, and changing facilities for users of the nearby marina. If funding allows, plans are also in place to enhance the scheme with new landscaping, public seating, a children's play area, and a canopy structure capable of providing comfortable outdoor shelter from rain and the sun. I'll bring you further updates as these projects develop. Mr. Mayor, it's too recent to make a detailed announcement today, but I feel I must mention that at yesterday's cabinet meeting, important and I would say historic decisions were made about investment in primary education in North Kennelly and further and higher education in Bridgend Town Centre. More information will follow in due course. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Lovely, thank you for that. Chief Executive announcements. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one announcement which I think follows on nicely from the presentation from Kelechi and David. I wanted to update members and give an insight into where we are with the coronavirus vaccination programme. The latest figures from Clontarf Magnog University Health Board have confirmed that now more than 529,600 vaccines have been administered throughout the region. This figure includes almost 318,800 people who received their first dose and more than 210,000 people who received their second dose. For Bridgend County Borough, it means that a cumulative total of almost 168,000 vaccinations have now been administered to local residents. That's a combination of first and second doses. In terms of progress, vaccinations for the first 5 priority groups have now all been completed, which, as you heard earlier, is tremendous news. This covers the residents and staff of care homes for older adults, people aged 65 to 80 and over, people who are clinically extremely vulnerable, and frontline health and social care workers. In addition to this, around 76% of people aged 16 to 64 who have underlying health conditions have been fully vaccinated, and GPs are continuing to complete this priority group. Unpaid carers who have not yet been vaccinated within their priority groups are being invited to contact the health board to arrange for an appointment, while 89% of people aged 60 and over have been fully vaccinated. Within the last week, 85% of people aged 55 and over have received their full vaccinations, while the priority group for people aged 50 and over has just passed the halfway mark at 53% completion. The final priority groups covers the remaining eligible adult population. Appointments for second doses are currently being issued to people aged between 40 and 49, and everyone aged 30 to 39 has now been offered their first vaccination. Around 58% of people aged 18 to 29 have also received their first dose, and appointment letters are continuing to be issued to this group as well. In other related news, as you heard earlier, you will have seen that the Delta variant is by now the most common viral strain identified in new cases of COVID-19, in fact exclusively the strain identified in recent cases in Bridgend. While there is no evidence to suggest that it is more dangerous, the Delta variant is certainly proving to be highly contagious. It's worth noting that the recent study carried out by Public Health England found the UK's 2 main vaccines, Pfizer and AstraZeneca, to be 33% effective against the Delta variant after 1 jab, but more than 80% effective after the second dose. Again, a clear message about getting fully vaccinated. This ably demonstrates how important it is for all people to complete their vaccinations. Together, our partners, we are reminding people of the importance of not letting their guard down and of all following rules and procedures to help keep our communities safe. This is especially significant as people seek to enjoy the summer weather or to celebrate events such as the European Football Championships. Members may wish to remind their constituents that mobile testing facilities remain available within the county borough, and full details can be found on the COVID-19 advice page at our council website. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mark. And yeah, I can thankfully say I've received both my jabs because somehow I fell into that over 55 category. Not sure where that came from, but that's where it happened. Before we move on to item 5, I have received a message with apologies from Councillor David White as well, who's unable to attend today. So that's another one to add to the apologies. That's item 4. Item 5 next. And receive announcements by the leader. Leader? Are you there?
It's possible, Mr. Mayor, that he may have popped out just onto the road as a funeral went past. I'm not 100% sure.
He did say he needed to do that at some point. Oh, hang on. Leader, are you there?
I'm here. Apologies, Mr. Mayor. I'm having problems with the broadband connection to Kevin Cribbo. It's not 5G or even 4G. I don't think it's 1G in Kevin Cribbo yet, so it's playing up today.
We can hear you.
You can hear. You can hear. Good, excellent. Okay, I'll give my report now. Then, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I would like to personally welcome Councillor Hughes, the new member of Nanty Moyle, to her first meeting. We look forward to working very closely with Councillor Hughes. Members may be aware that Armed Forces Day will take place this year on Saturday, 26th of June. While pandemic restrictions have limited how we've been able to mark this important occasion, we are proud the Armed Forces flag has been flying outside the civic offices in recognition of the event. We are also using the occasion to remind current and serving members of the military that an Armed Forces Community Covenant is in place to provide them with practical help and support. That is for serving members of the military, but also for veterans. The Covenant, which has been in place since 2013, pledges mutual support between the people of Bridgend County Borough, the Armed Forces community, public service organisations, local businesses, and the charitable and voluntary sectors. It brings organisations together at a local level to work in partnership and use their specialist knowledge, experience, and expertise to provide members of the Armed Forces community with appropriate help, support, and advice. Over the years, the Community Covenant has been developed and expanded to offer a range of practical benefits. As a result, housing applicants who require adapted accommodation due to injury sustained while in service, or who may need to find somewhere to live as a result of having left the Armed Forces, receive priority treatment.
Sorry, could I just ask Councillor Mary Hughes to turn the camera off, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Our council tax reduction scheme has been amended so that war widow pensions are no longer included when calculating a person's income. Our school place allocation policy also ensures that veterans are not disadvantaged when returning to Bridgend County Borough. Serving personnel and veterans can enjoy free sessions at our local Halo swimming pools across the County Borough and can apply to the Community Covenant Fund for financial support designed to help them integrate into civilian life. The Armed Forces Community Covenant makes it easier for service personnel, families and veterans to receive the help, support and recognition they so deserve. As well as representing a mark of respect, the Community Covenant demonstrates that the people of Bridgend County Borough have not forgotten the service, sacrifice and dedication of our armed forces. Information about the Armed Forces Community Covenant and how it can support local people is available at the council website, and we will continue to look for new ways to support members of the armed forces and veterans now and in the future. I'd also like to remind members the deadline for applying to the EU settlement scheme expires on the 30th of June. If you have constituents within your wards who are EU citizens, this is their last chance to apply to continue to live and work in the UK. Although the government has also confirmed there will be a 28-day extension for people who have a reasonable excuse for the delay. The council website contains a range of information about the settlement scheme and includes details on available support and advice. Members and residents can also visit the UK government's EU settlement scheme webpage. Finally, the latest phase in our ongoing investment into highway infrastructure is underway with a £2.7 million improvement scheme which is targeting 40 local roads. Resurfacing has already been completed on roads within Porthcawl, Nottage, Caira, Kevin Glass, and Brackler Industrial Estate, and is due to take place on the A4063 Maesteg Road in Tondy, as well as roads in Nantymoel, Brackler, you'll be pleased to hear, Mr Mayor, Llangaina, Shut and Pontycymer. Further repairs and resurfacing works will also take place later in the year, and more details on this will be confirmed soon. And finally, Mr Mayor, you did report on the event that you and I and colleagues attended with the famous wildlife broadcaster Iolo Williams on Saturday, and he had a message that he repeated several times about the need for every council across Wales and across the UK to minimise the grass cutting of our roadside verges so that we can enhance the biodiversity features of such areas. They are critical in terms of connecting our fragmented nature resources across the borough and across the UK. And his advice was very clear that the approach we are taking is the right approach, and it's an approach that we need to take in the future because of the threats that our biodiversity faces right across the borough. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Yep, I think the key thing is creating wildlife corridors is the message from Iolo, cross boundaries of authorities. Before we move on, I'd also like to welcome Councillor Mary Hughes to the first meeting. I'm not sure if you may have missed the early part of this meeting where you're asked to keep your camera and microphone off unless you wish to speak. And if you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand button at the top of the screen, just to helps everybody with the connections, broadband width or whatever it's called. Thank you very much. So we've done item 6. So the next item, agenda item 7. Revenue budget out to in 2020-21. Jill Lewis is going to give us a report, but before that, can I have a mover and seconder of the recommendations contained within the report, please?
Move the report.
Seconded?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Jill, over to you, please.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Hughes has got her hand up. I don't know if she wants to raise something.
Yeah, hang on. Yep, sorry. Thank you for that. Councillor Hughes, Councillor Mary Hughes.
Oh, yes, I did miss the start of the meeting because of a connection, but just thank you ever so much to the leader for that warm welcome. I am the newest member on this authority, but been around a long time, worked for BCBC, Argo Borough and Mid Glamorgan in total for 41 years. So that side of local authorities, and I wonder what's going to happen in the future in terms of sitting on the democratic side of things. But thank you very much, Leader, anyway.
Okay, and you can put your camera on when you're speaking, but now it's time to turn it off. We haven't put it on anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Okay, over to you, Jill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For the purposes of the recording, my name's Jill Lewis. I'm the Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. I've got with me today Deb Exton and Joe Norman, who will be happy after I've presented to answer any detailed questions that Council may have. So the purpose of the report today is to provide Council with an update on the Council's revenue financial performance for the year ended the 31st of March 2021. And I think it's fair to say, and you've heard me say it before, that this has been a rather unique year. And as I go through the report today, I'm sure you'll appreciate some of the things that have been somewhat out of the ordinary, I think, during the year. This isn't actually a report that has come to Council for some time. It is considered to be good practice. After all, Council do set the budget, and so I think it's entirely right that Council receive an out-term report on that budget. So even though you will be familiar with seeing it going to Cabinet and also the quarterly reports, and I know that COSC are familiar with it, this is the first time for some time that the out-term has been reported to Council. So just to go through the background, on the 26th of February, Council approved a revenue budget of 286.885 million. You will have seen regular budget monitoring reports, and as I said, this is the annual out-term report which gives you the year-end position. At 4.1, you'll see a summary of the financial position, and I'd just like to draw attention really to the narrative before going into some of the detail. The first, I think, is the impact of the hardship fund. You'll probably be aware that a COVID hardship fund was set up at an early stage by the Welsh Government, totalling 189 million. We were able throughout the year to draw on that through very detailed submission of monthly claims for both additional costs incurred in a number of service areas and also a loss of income. And as you'll appreciate, some of that was reasonably significant. However, there was a time lag as some of the decisions did take some time as to whether we would be successful in getting the money back from the hardship fund. And I think that's entirely reasonable. The Welsh Government wanted to make sure that there was consistency across councils, and certainly I was very vocal in that regard to make sure that we had certain categories that we were able to claim against. And they did set up a panel that looked at the different ways that councils delivered some of the services and obviously wanted to determine whether those would be successful. So as a consequence of that, and the reason that I'm going through this in some detail is that a significant amount of funding was received in the last quarter, and you will see from the report some of those figures. Additional to that, significant grants were received in the last quarter of the year, around about 3.5 million for directorates and council-wide, and very significantly 5.4 million for schools, and I will return to that a little bit later on in the presentation. So that obviously made a huge difference to the position that you're looking at today. And I have to say, in all the years I've been reporting on finance, this is a very unique position that we find ourselves in. We also received around 1.5 million as a result of our loss of council tax collection from the pandemic. And again, I'll return to that as a risk going forward. So as a result of many of these things, the year-end position changed considerably from when we gave you the information for setting the budget. And you'll see from the table on the level of investment that has been enabled by these grants and support that we've had, some of which are included in the capital report later in the agenda. So we've been able to hopefully accelerate some of the recovery and our way out of the pandemic. So the council's outturn position is shown in table 1. The overall position is an underspend of 432k, which has been transferred to the general fund, bringing that to 9.7 million in line with our MTFS principles. It brings it to about 5.27%, and you will have heard me say before to council that in an ideal world we would remain just over the 5% in terms of our general fund. The total directorate budgets net of the underspend is 5.8 million underspend, and the council-wide budget's 11.7 million. And these will help to fund ongoing risks and initiatives to help us with the recovery in the future. Most of the grants, in fact, all of the grants were for a purpose. They are covered by terms and conditions, and therefore these are not something that we've been able to just put into our general reserves. The late notification of monies, whilst obviously extremely welcome, we're all very happy to have additional grants, has resulted, unfortunately, for somebody who's reporting on the financial position, in a swing from Q3 to Q4 of £13 million. And obviously that makes a significant difference to the position that I've reported previously. Table 2 shows you the movement since Q3. 4.18, the next area that I want to refer to is that the underspend, whilst obviously significant as a result of the things that I've just run through, actually masks an underlying position in directorates, which is still a deficit position in many areas. Home to school transport and adult social care alone have got a combined overspend of 2 million. So I wouldn't want council to be lulled into any false sense of security by this rather unique position. We still do have intense pressure against many of our services, and that can only increase as we come through, hopefully, the latter stages of the pandemic and the effect that that will have had on many of our services. So it is with uncertainty, I guess, that we go forward into the future. Pay and price costs are as yet unknown. Inflation clearly could go any way, and recovery will all need funding, along with the potential pressure on collection of council tax and indeed a possible effect on council tax reduction where furlough comes to an end and there are even more pressures on our services. Looking at the figures on council tax for last year, obviously it's at a point in time and we continue to try and collect as much council tax as we can to help to deliver the services. We're about 1% down from 96.3% the year before, 1920, to about 95.3 last year. Now, obviously, we'll continue to try and collect that 1%, but we have been very careful to make sure that we are working with our residents to alleviate any pressures and difficulties that they may have in making those payments. Paragraph 4.1.12 sets out the impact of COVID on the council's financial position. And the council has supported residents as far as possible through COVID, and you will see that a number of additional services were put in place to support our residents. So table 3 and 4 set out the claims against the Welsh Government Hardship Fund and the amount received. The Hardship Fund will continue until September, but at that stage we don't know whether there will be any further monies for any of our services. We're hopeful that areas such as social care, where there'll continue to be ongoing pressures, and schools may be looked on favourably, but at the moment the situation is that the Hardship Fund will finish at the end of September. The rest of the report takes a familiar format. Table 5 sets out our prior year budget reductions. Table 6 sets out last year's budget reductions, and Table 7 gives the reasons why some of those may not have been achieved. And I have to say that despite the difficulties of the year, we still achieved a very significant percentage of the savings that we anticipated being able to deliver, which is, I think, pretty commendable. 4.3 onwards gives much more detail on the financial position in each of the directorates and the corporate position. I just wanted to come back to schools at 4.3.1. You will see the change in the school balances. You will have heard me say to council previously that many of our schools are in deficit. The change as a result of the grants has gone from an 108k surplus position for all schools for the whole year, in total to 8.49 million at the year end. So that gives you a bit of a flavour of the additional monies that have been allocated to schools. Now, this money will be managed in line with financial protocols, as you would expect, and we'll be closely monitoring all that spend to make sure that it's delivered in line with the terms of the grant. 4.4.1 provides a commentary on the earmarked reserves, and there's much more detail in Appendix 5 on those reserves. And Table 8 shows the drawdown of the reserves, and Table 9 shows the year-end position, with Table 10 giving you an overall reserve position for the council. And that's really all I was going to say to council today, Mr. Mayor. If I take you to the recommendations at 9.1, and happy to take any questions that councillors may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. And first, you from the Deputy Leader, Councillor Howard Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I just may begin by thanking Jill and the finance team. We are very fortunate to have a very experienced and dedicated finance team in Bridgend that has kept us safe over the last year. You know, not all authorities are in that same position as we are, so we are very fortunate with our team, and my sincere thanks to Jill and the team for that. Obviously, as Jill has pointed out, this has been an extraordinary year, and we are very grateful to the Welsh Government for the setting up of the Hardship Fund. That has made a huge difference to the authority. You know, without that £21.5 million, we would be in a very different position this afternoon. As Jill has highlighted, there are still significant financial pressures within individual directorates. And so, you know, we've got still got a difficult time ahead of us. So the report has been moved. I'm happy to support the report. And, you know, this is the first time it's come to council. So it'll be interesting to see now what questions are presented. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, it's been proposed. The report has been moved to second. We'll go to questions from members now. Councillor Alex Williams next.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jill, and the finance team for the report. I'm obviously very pleased that the position has changed considerably in a positive direction, but arguably we could have expected that we would have been in this position before we set the budget. I know it's very difficult for you to have made that judgment categorically, but clearly it does have an impact upon our decision making when you look back retrospectively. And perhaps I can ask the Deputy Leader, who's responsible for finance, whether if we were in this favourable position now, whether he thinks that the administration would have recommended an inflation-busting 3.9% increase in council tax. Now, the reason why I asked that question is not to be overtly political, because that is, you know, old news now. That is what has happened. But given the risk which is being presented by Jill in the collection tax rate, which has been a difficulty over the last year, and potentially could be even more of a difficulty over the next year, especially amongst those people who are struggling to pay that council tax bill, which often is the case, could be the second largest expense in their household following their mortgage. Does that present an additional risk, do you think? And also, it would be interesting, given the fact that there are additional budget pressures over the next financial year, as has been outlined by Jill, and she said that she didn't want to lull us into a false sense of security by this favourable financial position. Perhaps the relevant cabinet ministers, cabinet members, or the corporate directors could outline exactly why there are specific pressures in home to school transport and adult social services, so that we can have a greater understanding of why there are specific risks and pressures in those areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Deputy Leader, would you like to respond first?
What the question is, with the benefit of hindsight, where would I have set the council tax rate? And yes, if I had known for absolute sure that the outturn position would be fortuitous, then that would have had an impact on the on whatever council tax rate all 54 councillors are asked to set at the time. You know, we just use the best available evidence we've got at the time, and it is our statutory duty to set a balanced budget. So, you know, it's, yes, you're asking me a question now, what would I have done with the benefit of hindsight? I am saying that with the evidence presented before us at the time, I believe, and I still believe, that the 3.9% was the sensible and prudent approach for setting council tax at that time. I must also say that I'm very grateful, to the Welsh Government for providing a council tax reduction scheme, because they support single households and households on low incomes, and I believe that support is around 14 or 15 million pounds. So you know, the most vulnerable residents of our society, which Councillor Williams has identified, do get some significant support in helping them to pay their council tax bills.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Jill, will you come back in?
Yes, if I could just, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just add to the deputy's answer, I think council will have heard me say a number of times the difference between general reserves, recurring expenditure and one-off. And what I do want to remind council at this point is that the majority of the money that's been received is for a purpose. It's a one-off, non-recurring grant and is earmarked for next year to deliver our recovery and our additional costs. So this isn't something that that we could have taken into account as a general recurring balance. So I think it's really important that we distinguish between the two. So if you stripped out the additional non-recurring expenditure that grant monies that we've been given, we would still be in the sort of position that we were reporting. So I just want to make that very clear, because there could be a feeling that we've got masses of general reserves and we haven't.
Thank you for that, Jill. Useful. We'll go to the two cabinet members. Ask for comments. Councillor Nicole Burnett and Councillor Charles Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I just want to reassure Councillor Williams that I really do have the utmost sympathy and empathy and understanding for our residents that find it difficult to make council tax payments. I've been a single mother claiming universal credit, and I know how tight budgets can be, but at the same time, as cabinet member of social services and early help, I am fearful. I really am fearful by the pressures that we are still under and will continue to be under for goodness knows how long. We're seeing impact on the service with those suffering with long COVID, and more cases are coming forward. We've got considerable backlogs as a result of lockdown, with people starting to come through. This is in early help and adult social care, and we are in the storm is coming and there's no sign of it ceasing. So for me, combine that with the workforce pressures that we're under. I am very grateful for this money. It's not that we've got surplus money that we can spend on frivolities and vanity projects. This is going towards looking after the most vulnerable people we have in our society. And I can't see any way out of this, to be honest. So it's a continuing problem, and those are the decisions that we're having to make. But these are life-saving decisions, and they have to come first, as far as I'm concerned. So that's my position.
Thank you, Councillor Charles Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Councillor Williams, if I understood him correctly, wanted to know why home to school transport is still a budget pressure. The quick answer is that it's still a budget pressure because we still have austerity. So austerity is still with us, and a budget cut for home to school transport is still in the MTFS. Now, when the proposed cuts came before Cabinet a little while ago, because of the pretty good settlement we had with Welsh Government, and because of the decision we'd made to set the council tax at a certain level, we felt we could resist the pressure, and so the decision was deferred. In Bridgend, as Councillor Williams will know, we provide home to school transport at a more generous level than Welsh Government criteria. Councillor Williams knows that because I've had referrals from him when he's making a case for pupils to have school transport when it's been denied. So it's no mystery that home to school transport is under pressure. We deferred the decision because we had intelligence and information that the Welsh Government was going to revise the criteria. And I don't think that revision has come through yet. Obviously, Welsh Government has had other things to do with its re-election process, etc. So the current position is that those cuts are deferred, but we will come under pressure again for those cuts to happen. And people who want us to cut council tax will have to, if they want to keep home to school transport, they'll have to show us what alternative cuts we can make in order to maintain the service at the current levels. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Claire Margent, is there in relation to this question? Do you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing. And just to build on what the Cabinet member has said around the pressures underlying adult social care, there are three underlying issues. One is the demographics. We're obviously an ageing population, and with ageing comes the greater need for care in lots of our lives and circumstances. The impact of COVID, as the Cabinet member has said, Welsh Government has published a rehabilitation framework and done lots of modelling which shows that the impact of long COVID, the impact of the extended period of shielding for lots of vulnerable people, and the impact on physical and mental health and well-being, and the delay in NHS treatments, all with it brings a need for increased adult social care. And the third issue, which is interrelated, is the cost of care, the need to pay a fair price in terms of our workforce and our commissioned services, and all of those combine to mean that there are underlying pressures in adult social care, both in year and in future years in terms of the budget which Council will be asked to consider. So thanks for the opportunity just to build on that.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Right, moving on to the next Councillor Sharon Green, name the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I thank Jill for a very comprehensive report and acknowledge that this past year has probably been the hardest one for this authority, certainly since I've been here. My question is actually on home to school transport, but not on the pressures that we are currently experiencing, but on the overspend of the 2020 to 2021. It's page 207.4.3.1, and it's the sort of question you'll get asked by the more interested members of the public. There was an overspend, and yet there was one term that we obviously weren't providing transport. I do appreciate that there would be need for retainers to ensure that the bus companies didn't go out of business completely. And I also would appreciate that there were wage bills and fuel requirements had they been operating, but the furlough scheme would have kicked in and there would be no need to have purchased fuel. So all I would like is, in case I am asked a question, and I might well be, why was there an overspend if we didn't have one term? Thank you.
Before Jill comes in, Councillor Green, I think it looks like you're in sinking sand. You're disappearing below the screen. Jill, over to you, Jill.
I think I've got the question right, but I'm not sure whether Lindsay might want to come in or Deb. We were instructed, Councillor Green, by the Welsh Government to pay a 75% retainer on home to school transport, and we still reserve the right to inspect books and to look at our transport providers to make sure that they complied with the terms and conditions of having that retainer. So that's why we paid 75%. Was that the question, or it was? I'm not quite sure I understood the term bit, the one term.
Yeah, it was the term where the schools were actually closed, Jill. But now that you've answered that, you had to pay 75%. That is what I was after. Is why such? If it was that large, then I totally understand. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Like, no further indications or questions. The report has been moved and seconded. So is Council happy to note, as in paragraph 9.1, note the revenue outturn position for 2020-21?
Move.
All happy with that? Okay. All in favour of that? Thank you for that, Jill. We now move on to item 8 on the agenda then, which is the capital programme update. Back to you, Jill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, the Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. And I've got with me today Deb Exton and Joe Norman, who will be happy to help with any detail that you may require. So the purpose of the report this afternoon is to seek approval from Council for a revised capital programme for 2021 to 2030-31. Just to remind Council that the capital programme is a 10-year programme, and that's set out in detail at Appendix A. So the background to this, again, on the 24th of February, Council approved a capital programme covering that period that I've just referred to. Since then, we've reviewed the available capital resources, taking into account any uncommitted funding, the year-end revenue position for 2021 that we've just spoken about, the earmark reserve position and the revenue budgets available for 21-22. Now, as a result of the surplus that I've just spoken about and the uncommitted funding, we have new capital schemes that are being proposed. They're in front of you today as Council, and just to assure Council, they've been through rigorous review, challenge and prioritisation through CMB and the Cabinet. So this report is not the outturn on capital. This report is seeking approval for the inclusion of the new schemes in the capital programme. And then in July at Council, you will have a report on the outturn, which shows the updated capital programme for 21-22 onwards. It'll also detail the slippage from 2021, which has been reasonably significant, as you might expect, and the prudential and the other indicators that you'll be used to receiving at Council. So the capital programme that was approved by Council in February totaled 206 million, and that was going to be met from 116 million of BCBC monies and the balance from external resources. The new schemes that are set out before you for approval will be funded from earmark reserves, which have been set up specifically for the purpose, and will be from unallocated general funding received through the 21-22 local government settlement and public realm funding. I also just want to draw attention to one scheme that also needs approval by Council for a school, an energy scheme through a Salix loan. The total for all these schemes is 4.5 million. They're shown in Table 1 in detail, with Table 2 showing the breakdown of funding. And at 4.4, you can see 4.4 onwards, you can see the detail on each of the schemes. I think there are some very exciting schemes in there that we've been able to apply funding to. I wasn't going to go through them in detail, but obviously the corporate directors are here if you should have any questions on anything related to their directorate. So that was all really I wanted to say to Council today, Mr. Mayor. If I take you to the recommendations at 991.
Thank you, Jill. Can I ask for a mover and seconder of the report first?
Chair.
Move, Chair. Second. Right, thank you. If we can go then to the Deputy Leader, Councillor Howard Williams.
Yes, and obviously in supporting or moving the report, I'd just like to say that it's because of our prudent management of the revenue budget. This has enabled us to bring these projects forward. Now, the capital is just about one-off single projects that the council sort of brings forward. And although there's many exciting projects in there, I'm just going to pick out the one that's in my sort of my responsibility, and that's the replacement of the closed circuit television system. That is going to be a massive benefit, I believe, to all residents across the county borough. You know, it's the system has been there for quite some time now. It has had problems, but this investment will certainly make the borough a smart county borough. It's much more than closed circuit TV. It enables us to record air quality and monitor flood risk areas. It really is an exciting system, and I hope everyone will get behind it.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Disha Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to also highlight some schemes that I found particularly interesting, and one was making Arwen and Halo facilities accessible for disabled groups, and I thought that would be really good for our residents with mobility issues, and I thought we should highlight the fact that this work is happening, and so watch this space. And also the gully sucking equipment. Now it's not one of those glamorous things that we all talk about, but I know it's something that our residents feel really passionately about. So we've invested £140,000 in gully sucking equipment. So hopefully you'll see that on roads near you soon. And then my favourite is playground refurbishment. I'm really excited that we've managed to find money in the budget to support this. It's a lot of money, and I'm hoping it will go a long way. I know it said 30 play parks on average in the report, but I'm pretty sure that we can spend that wisely and hopefully extend the number of parks that will benefit, because I know there's the impact of COVID has been particularly hard on young people. So in renovating their play parks and encourage them to use the outdoor space is something I'm really keen to do. So yeah, just wanted to highlight those three from me.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Councillor Sol Dendy next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I applaud when any school tries to be a bit more self-sufficient, especially when it comes to doing something to tackle climate change and use of solar panels. It's just a quick question, really. I do know of other primary schools that have for quite a few years been trying to get solar panels, but haven't been able to afford it out of their own budgets. So I was just wondering if there are other schools that are also working with the council's energy manager and corporate landlord section, and whether there's any other schools that have presented an interest in having the solar panels through this, and whether there was a look at being able to have these sort of loans through our council in the future with them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dendy. Anybody able to respond?
I think Lindsay's going to come in, Mr. Mayor, on this one.
Thanks, Councillor Dendy. Yes, I agree with you. I think it's a really exciting
development. I know we've worked very closely with Corporate Landlord and the energy manager. I know he's done a lot of work with individual schools on this, because obviously from a variety of agendas, this is very important for us. It's an exciting development at Litchard Primary School, and one of the things we're keen to do is for Jeremy, the head of the school, is to share his experiences and make sure that we use what they've learned and share them across the local authority, and where feasible, where possible, then develop them in other schools. So I'd be more than happy to provide council, and you in particular, Councillor Dendy, with an update if this progresses.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Guy Thomas, can I ask you to take your camera off, please?
Sorry, it went offline about 10 minutes. I've been sitting here.
You're back on. Okay, if you can. Deborah Exton, Deborah?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the recording, it's Deborah Exton, Interim Deputy Head of Finance. Just to respond to the councillor, there is actually already a scheme within the capital programme, an energy saving scheme, to implement a number of energy saving measures across a number of buildings within the council. Quite a large amount of those are actually schools. So there are a number of different options that they're proposing for schools to save energy. But we are also working with a number of other schools already on solar panel, putting in solar panels. So we're just coming to a position where we're trying to work out what the business case is. So Litchard isn't the only one who's benefiting from some of these energy saving measures, and as I say, the energy manager is actually going around to a number of schools and offering his advice and potential proposals for measures to put in place to make savings in the future. But we have got quite, as I say, we have got quite a large programme already in place for different energy saving measures, you know, in terms of lights and maybe solar panels and boiler replacements such as that. So not just the solar panels option, other options as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for that. Thanks. Mark Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As other contributors have said, there's some very exciting capital projects here. I just think it's worth me emphasising that this is a report to approve capital allocations, and while obviously we like to ensure that they're brought to you as educated and expert estimates, they are exactly that. They're estimates, and they are often pre-feasibility, design, planning, procurement, so in particular the market element of that. I make that point because you certainly know, Mr. Mayor, we tend to have a perennial debate about why then a scheme doesn't exactly fit the allocation that has been put in here. So I just emphasise for members, clearly the discipline is to try and keep within the allocation if at all we can, but I would emphasise that inevitably the way these things work, we have to bring to you for approval an allocation before we've done a lot of the work that will finally determine the final cost. And I just think it's worth making that point because I know it is something that's come up previously.
Thank you, Mark. We've still got a few people to speak. I am looking to, after this, if we can have a comfort break, so I definitely need one. We have two more speaker questions. Councillor Ross Thomas and then Councillor Tim Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just very quickly want to welcome the Commercial Property Enhancement Fund. Many businesses in my stake, hospitality, rugby clubs, etc., have benefited from this. And hopefully will continue to do so as they recover from COVID. In fact, the leader bumped into me on Friday afternoon as I was enjoying an outdoor coffee at one of the businesses in my stake market that have benefited from this fund. I'm just wondering if there's any way that the local authority is looking at return on investment, whereby we're either speaking with businesses or we're looking at footfall so that we can see we spent X amount of money in local town centres or supporting local businesses, and we're having a return on investment either in their takings possibly or just in footfall in general. But I think it would be really good to see what the outcome is, other than just sort of physical structures out in outdoor spaces. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Janine.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Would you like me to answer that question to Councillor Thomas?
You can, please.
Thank you. So for the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale and I am the Corporate Director of Communities. So thank you, Councillor Thomas. That's a really interesting question, and it is something that we are intending to do actually. When we have applications from businesses for that Commercial Property Enhancement Fund, we do ask questions as what do you want to achieve, you know, what will it do in terms of increasing footfall to your premises, enhancing opening hours, etc. So we do look at what the impact will be, not just on the premises, but on the surrounding area as well, because increased footfall, as you say, to a coffee shop is good for the butcher, the baker and everybody all around. It just adds some vibrancy to the town centre. Now, one of our performance indicators, of course, is footfall, and we monitor that via our corporate plan, and also visitors is another indicator. It's been incredibly difficult to be accurate with that via COVID. So we're spending this next year benchmarking those figures and looking at what they are, and then looking how we can in future years get back to the numbers that we're used to. Incidentally, some of the valley towns in particular, like my stake, have done incredibly well throughout the pandemic in terms of footfall and vibrancy, but we know we do need to do a little bit more work in Bridgend town centre. But if we come back to the original question, yes, we are going to collect some data, because what's important is that we see what added value we're getting from the economic development, so that £150,000 fund hopefully will generate a lot more in terms of benefits to those businesses in those town centres. And when we do know more, I'd be very happy to come back and talk to you about it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jane, for that. Thank you very much. And the last we can now is Councillor Tim Thomas, and then we can see if I go for a comfort break.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's got nothing to do with this, actually. I did indicate at the start of the meeting I've got to go at 5. I've really pushed my luck now. I got to nip to the childminders to get my children. I do know I've got a question. I think it's best to probably scrap the question. I do really want to have the answer, but I'm happy to email the cabinet member to get a response on that one. So I thought I'd better notify you on that one.
Okay. I mean, the answer has been provided. Perhaps if you could send any further question to the.
Oh, that's exactly what I meant. I got a supplementary that I want to ask. So perhaps.
Right. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have been just for 2 hours as a meeting. Intend to have a comfort break because 2 hours is more than enough. And unfortunately, everybody's commitments are different. If you can't make it back for the other meeting, that question can't be put.
Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I just come in there? This opportunity is open to everybody without having to wait till council meeting. So by all means, Councillor Thomas, send me the supplementary and I will get the answer to you as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. Stay kind.
Okay. Cheers. Thank you very much, both. Right, this report has been moved and seconded. The recommendation is recommend the council approves the revised capital programme for 2021 to 2030-31. We're all in favour?
Aye. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Nobody against that. Right, as I just said, we've been over 2 hours. So I intend to, if we can have a comfort break, it's 17:17 go to my computer. So if we can take it to 17:30, that's 13 minutes. I know it's a bit odd. 17:18 now. So we can come back for 17:30, 5:30 to restart the meeting and give chance everybody to have a quick comfort break, quick drink, and then we'll start again at 5:30. Thank you.